In the beginning, suddenly an explosion, a king of all explosions, erupted the isthmus of it all. It covered the universe and was the universe in a multitude of colors and celestial tones. From its source burst the greatest love there is, creating an orgasmic effect to be surpassed by none. Sparks, which comprised the source, shot out into the vast expanse of space. This was the beginning of experience, the beginning of creation. When the Source created a universe with galaxies for purpose of experience, within one of these magnificent galaxies, a planet was forming. This planet was called Terra. These sparks of the Source entities watched as the planet evolved from a molten mass to an inhabitable world. These entities contributed to this great creation of Terra, an entity itself, by using their power of manifestation. They created creatures to inhabit Terra. It was great sport for the entities to experiment with their creations. For instance, a butterfly was created, and then many variations upon that design of creature was created. They sometimes went to extremes in their creations, such as creating the beasts to be known as dinosaurs. At this time, the entities were still in the ethers, and many became more intrigued with the physical world, deciding that they should indeed experience it firsthand. Some entered into the animal forms on Terra for this experience. When the Source saw what was happening, a human form was created for the entities to inhabit for their experience of physical. However, it was too late for some of the entities. They had become trapped within these animal embodiments. Their vibration had been lowered within these beings, and their powers were no longer functioning to be able to free themselves. It was very sad. They wept at their folly. However, there was still a bond of love between these entities of both physical and spiritual form, and in their indiscretion, the entities in human form, in animal embodiments, conducted intercourse. This deed procreated half-man, half-animal creatures. It was then that divine law was set forth, and only likes could produce likes, and the human form, previously androgynous, was divided into male and female. From this experimentation there was left on Terra mermaids, satyrs, and half-man, half-beasts of many species. Many of these offspring became gifted in music and the arts. However, as time passed, most weren't so fortunate to be blessed with such talents, and this race of half-breeds became the beginning of prejudice on Terra. One of the 5 places that this experimentation had taken place on Terra was the continent of ATLATIA. It has been referred to as a Garden of Eden. It was a paradise. In these early days, man was a giant that stood between 10 and 12 feet tall. He knew no death nor disease. It wasn't until when his physicality had drawn a curtain between him and the Source that his years dwindled from thousands of years to hundreds of years old. What was happening to the entities that had chosen the physical experiment in these 5 places on Terra would be the foundation for these entities' future. The events that took place here would affect everything that would enter their physical lives until they were able to find their way back to the Source. There were those that still connected to the Source who chose to help their fellow entities find their way back. They became known as the children of the Law of One. There were also those who became so enamored with the physical world that they sought only the power of the physical, which they believed would give them the power that they had once had. These people became known as the Sons of Belial. As time progressed, the expanse of different beliefs that divided these factions of people would grow, and the connection to the Source would fade, and the effects would be devastating. Chapter 1. Oron and Esser. The world at the time of the second period of ATLATIA, or the Golden Era, was similar in appearance to the planet Venus today. It was wrapped in a cloud cover which kept the air sparkling moist. However, Terra allowed a perfect amount of sun to shine through, so that the earth was lush with vegetation. It was a paradise of flowering plants, shrubs, trees, and plants that produced an abundance of enormous vegetables and fruits. The Atlateans loved their gardens and tended them with great care. Most homes in the city and businesses had their own gardens as well. Fields for farming purposes were located outside the walls of the city. Also in this era, industry had abounded and factories created many of the new technological advances, such as television, radio, household appliances, as well as fine fabrics that would be made into clothes. ATLATIA was at its peak. Alta, the captain of ATLATIA, which lay on the island of Pisidia, was a bustling city situated on a hill. It was surrounded with water, making it an easy port for commerce. After the first cataclysm which struck ATLATIA, the enormous continent was divided into 5 islands. Pisidia was the largest island. The country had been devastated, but with the great will of the Atlateans, they were able to make it more prosperous than ever. The institution of the great fire crystal was a major advancement. Through this great power source, airships, water ships were able to open trade again with the world. Also from this and other crystal generators, they received their source of electrical power. They were able to light and heat their homes and buildings easily. All of this took time, but technology seemed to soar. The sons of Belial gained a foothold in government and encouraged the technology to take precedent over all. At this time, the conflict between the sons of Belial and the children of the Law of One were just beginning to affect the unity of the country. There were still those in scientific studies that were of the Law of One. One such man was a mathematician named Pico. Pico contributed greatly to a reconstruction period. He used his skills to assist in the reconstruction of the temples. It was through his work that he met his mate. In ATLATIA, they didn't have marriages. When a person met another and fell in love, they would go to the high priest and have their auras sealed. It was understood that if your vibration or that of your mate should change, it was all right to have your auras unsealed. Then it was acceptable for you to find another mate. There were never any feelings of remorse if your vibrations should change. Pikel's mate was the lovely priestess Shiaba, who worked in the Temple of Beauty. It was while he was helping at the construction of the great edifice that he met Shiaba and fell in love. From this union, they begat a son, Oron. In ATLATIA, children at the age of 3 left their parents and were raised by a group mother. This would allow parents to perform their duties in society, as well as give the child an environment where he would be regarded as an entity unto himself without any projections of guilt and unlove by his parents. It was a total atmosphere of love and sharing and not owning. Parents visited their children daily. It wasn't until the child reached their own period of maturity that he would go out into society to perform his required function. In this second period of ATLATIA, the prejudice of the sons of Belial against the things, the half-man, half-beast, became more intense. The sons of Belial used the things for menial chores and treated them like slaves. They were sometimes even treated worse than animals. Because of this prejudice, the things were unable to improve their lot and remained poor, ignorant beings who only obeyed the master they served. As children, the things were not allowed into the group home for children and instead were treated more like beasts of burden. This was a major conflict between the children of the Law of One and the sons of Belial. Those of the Law of One tried to protect those poor, unfortunate entities who found themselves caught in these half-man, half-animal bodies. They would try to educate him and heal them physically and emotionally in the great temples. However, after the reconstruction of ATLATIA, it became increasingly difficult for those of the Law of One to perform the operations, such as the one in the Temple of Beauty. It was there that unwanted appendages could be removed to give them total human form. The sons of Belial thrived on the new technology, and as it flourished, they became in need of mindless beings to perform the tedious task of farming, factory work, etc. Although man's technologies had increased to such an extent that his basic needs were more than adequate, man developed new needs, greed, and a thirst for power. One day, Shiaba climbed the great steps that led to the entrance of the main temple, this temple of sacrifice. When she reached the top, she could see a basket safely snuggled between one of the great pillars. On top of the blanket that covered the blanket was a note. It read, "Please protect my baby. I cannot." I could not endure seeing him treated as I knew they would. Please help him and love him. His name is Esser. Chiaba opened the blanket to see what appeared to be a ball of fuzz. It was about the size of a melon curled up in a little ball with his eyes shut. It really was a baby thing, half human, half animal. It had the head, wings, tail, and torso of a baby eagle, and the lower part of his body was human. It had a golden beak with jet black wings and a white breast. It squealed as she picked him up. Chiaba was already with child, but she couldn't resist the baby. Thing or not, although the sounds were bird-like, his coos of happiness could not be mistaken as she held him in his arms. She knew she had to protect his baby. She took him to the innermost chamber of the temple and cared for him as if he were her own. Not long after, the baby felt that she was his mother and loved her as any baby would love his mother. I know, because I was that baby. From the first, Pikal was taken with me. I amused him, and he would laugh as I flapped my wings in an effort to crawl or attempt to fly. He spent time with me when he could and brought me toys and food. A better behaved baby they couldn't have asked for. I never cried, but only cooed with happiness. When Oron was born, it was easy for them to hide me in their home. They could even take the two of us out in a carriage together as long as they were careful to keep the hood of the carriage lowered. Even as babies, Oron and I were like brothers. We played together and discovered life new experiences together. Then Oron turned 3. It was time for him to go to the group home. It was a tough time for both of us. Neither understood why we couldn't remain together. For safety, I returned to the sanctuary of the temple. Pikal and Chiaba would bring Oron to the temple to visit me. I had to remain Oron's secret friend. I would help the priests around the temple, and although I couldn't communicate with words, my intelligence transcended into gestures and sounds. I was fondly loved by all who knew me. When we were 7, Oron and I sneaked out of the temple and went up into the hills that surrounded Alta. Here I showed Oron my latest feat. I could fly. I really had been able to for years, but I didn't have enough courage to go out and do it in front of my friend. As the years passed, I was taking Oron on flights around the countryside. These rendezvous continued, but soon we would have to sneak out into the country to begin our adventures. We would climb to the top of the temple and fly off from there. One day, as we were returning from our adventures, we touched down and found Chiaba waiting for us. She watched as the two of us gleefully flew towards her. Both of us, lost in our excitement, laughed and screamed. We saw her standing, watching us. There was a smile on her face as we approached. She didn't want to ruin our fun. She loved us both very much, and what she had to tell us wasn't going to be easy. "Mother, did you see that?" Oron blurted out as he dismounted. "We were almost as high as the airships today." "Not before?" she asked. Oron realized that what he had said and swallowed hard. "No, Mother." A moment passed before she could bring herself to address us. "Oron, I'm not scolding you for what you have done, although you have put Esser in jeopardy with your fun. However, I've come to tell you that your father awaits you at the entrance. Today, Oron, you should be admitted as an apprentice scribe in the Hall of Records." "Great!" Oron screamed with delight. "I shall be a great scribe one day. It had always been his dream." Chiaba turned to me. "Today is also a new day for you as well, my son. Today you must enter society." Fear entered Oron's face. "No, he cannot," Oron objected. Chiaba put her arms around us. "He must. It is the only way. He cannot live within these walls forever. Esser shall go with you, Oron. It has been arranged. He shall be regarded as your servant, and when in public you both must assume those roles." Oron's bottom lip quivered. "Mother, I could never treat him as a servant. He is my brother, my friend." "He will always be those, won't you, Esser?" Chiaba asked me. I nodded my head and then imitated a brave man. "If you can be brave, so can I," Oron hugged me. "But remember, this is only pretend. This is for his own good. He can learn along with you. When he reaches his physical maturity, Perhaps the high priest will permit Esser to be operated on in the Temple of Beauty to remove his bird features so he could be able to function as the human soul he is. We understood the seriousness of this charade and the consequences for me if we should not perform well. We also understood that there would be no more flights for fun around the countryside. We were growing up, and this would be one of the many tests ahead of us. We walked solemnly down the chamber steps to the entrance. Pikal was waiting for us. In his hand was a collar and a leash. I could see Oron wince as he caught sight of it. I still played the role of a brave man, although the thought of wearing it seemed rather humiliating. I never let either of them know my true feelings. I walked up to Pikal, who gave me a hug and a kiss. I shall never forget this moment, my son. I pray for the day when a man will not have to resort to such charades in order to protect himself from such prejudices. As he clasped the collar on my neck, a tear fell from Pikal's eye. I shall always love you as if you were my own. His words meant more to me than he would ever know. I had always longed to know my true parents, and although that void was in my life, could never be filled with, his words came as close to anything ever would fill to that empty part of me. Oron and I walked alone down the steps to the temple. The thought of keeping me, his brother, his friend on a leash, tore at Oron's heart. He looked sadly back at his parents, who watched us from the entrance. Although he was aware of the son's ability and their actions against the things, he had never personally encountered it. The only experience he had was hearing stories of things being ignorant and listening to others poking fun at them. The thought that anyone considered me dumb enraged him. Having heard the stories, I was never offended. I was intelligent. I knew it as well as Oron. Perhaps it was the security in myself that kept me from the fear that seemed to possess him. Maybe I couldn't converse as other people, but Oron and those I loved always knew what I was thinking, and to me that was all that mattered. Perhaps it was instinctive, because I was the only one those that loved me and people who love one another to possess the ability to know what the other is thinking. Oron's and my relationship was special, and he, above anyone, knew what was going on in my mind. So up to this time, it really didn't feel unusual to not vocally express myself. It wasn't until later in my life that my lack of vocal expression became a major obstacle. That part of my life was soon to begin. I had spent my life, up until this day, in the sanctuary of the temple. My only encounters with the outside world had been the priests and priestesses, my parents, and Oron. I had been told by Chapt of the danger that was beyond the temple walls, and that there were people who would treat me badly because of my bird qualities. Despite her words and the worried look on my friend's face, I was fearless of these people. This collar and leash were humiliating, but I didn't fear them. Oron was like my brother, and with all the games that we had played before, I pretended that this was just another. Actually, I was looking forward to this adventure. I had often dreamt of walking through the city of Alta, and today I would get that chance. I loved the fact that I was actually walking down this temple street in daylight. I could feel the marble walk under my feet and smell the floral fragrance of the temple gardens which bordered the street and the temple community. To see it all up close instead of from the sky thrilled me. I walked proudly, my head high. I stretched my wings with excitement, expanding them to their full length. "You're loving this, aren't you?" Oron asked. I nodded my head and strutted ahead of him. "Hey, don't walk so fast," he scolded. "We'll be there soon enough. The Hall of Records is just the other side of the park." Oron stopped for a moment and tugged on my leash lightly. He stood for a moment staring across the park. "Esser, I've been thinking a long time about becoming the greatest scribe in ATLATIA. I've told you that before, but today will be my first day toward realizing that dream, and I'm just sorry that it has to be like this." He held up the leash. "I just want you to know that as long as you're working with me, and I will always consider you working with me, not for me, I know that we will be successful." I took my great wings and enveloped my friends with a hug, and I thought, "We shall always be a team, Oron. I will help you find your dream. Then someday perhaps you can help me find mine." Although at that moment I had no dreams, My life had been blissful, and until that day I'd never wanted anything except to know my real parents, but I had long since given up finding them. We walked down the marble path that led to the various temples. Each temple was glistening in gold and silver with domes and spires reaching for the sky. It was magnificent. The air was sweet with fragrances from the many flowers that lined the path. Trees were in bloom, accentuating the beauty that was everywhere. I could see birds perched on the floral branches. I envied their freedom. I looked back at my friend. His face was fallen. I softly sang a tune to get his attention. He smiled. "It's okay, really." He smiled back, feeling the happiness I felt just being in this new world. After passing the beautiful 5 temples of the temple community, we came to the Hall of Records. It was a pyramidal structure built of marble. It was a huge building housing the history of mankind. The outside of the building had rows of hieroglyphs climbing to the golden capped peak. Heading up to the main entrance were steps on each side. Stood a figure of a great person from the history of ATLATIA. There were both men and women who had been leaders. Others philosophers, mathematicians, scientists, etc. Each in the pose representing the work he or she performed in life. These figures were twice the size of a real man. The sight of them was thrilling. Oron read the inscriptions as we passed. "Look, this is the inventor of the fire crystal. He must have been smart." The statue actually held a huge crystal in his palms, in a stance as if to hand it to us. Each statue was more intriguing to me. I pointed to a statue of a woman dressed in a long cape and gown. On her head was a crown of gold. Oron smiled. She was beautiful. This was the queen of ATLATIA when ATLATIA was one island. She reigned during the most peaceful age of ATLATIA. Her father was King Posidia, which the capital was named after. Although I was enjoying taking our time looking at the magnificent statues, I could see that Oron was anxious to go inside. This was his dream. Oron took a deep breath as he and I climbed the steps to the entrance. Jason, the scribe who Oron was assigned, waited for us at the doorway. "You must be Oron, son of Pikal and Shiaba." He was a slim man at the winter of his life, with silver gray hair and white glistening teeth. He wore a burgundy and gray robe with silver piping on the edges. Despite his age, he appeared full of life and energy. He smiled and extended his hand to Oron. Oron smiled. "Yes, I am. I begin my apprenticeship today." "I am Jason. You shall be my apprentice." He looked at me. "This is your servant?" Oron choked out a yes. Although Pikal had told us that Jason was there were many who would be at the Hall of Records, and thus the pretense had to be kept. "He is extremely helpful. I'm sure you shall be pleased with us both." "Both, huh?" He scratched his beard. "Very well. Come." Jason led us into the massive building with tall ceilings. The first floor was divided into chambers where scribes were working diligently. Above, we could see on each floor, beyond the white railings, stacks upon stacks of scrolls filed on shelves. Scribes engulfed in their work sat diligent reading or writing. I started to share Oron's excitement as I looked around us. In the center of the building, a large crystal generator sat. Jason pointed to it. "This is the main terminal. It accesses information from each individual terminal located in each scribe's chamber. When you finish your apprenticeship, you will be assigned to a terminal of your own. Until then, you shall work on mine. Come." We were in total awe as we followed Jason. We watched as scribes worked in their chambers at their terminals, while others were reading or pulling and filing scrolls starred on racks in the upper floors of the hall. Jason led us to a vacant chamber. "This is my chamber." Upon a table sat a small box. You could see right through it. Inside it, as the mechanism appeared as if it did nothing. Jason hit a mark on the side, and the device lit up with symbols and letters. In front of it, a screen lit up, and as Jason pushed a letter, it appeared on the screen. "This is an entry machine. All that is recorded goes through one of these terminals. It's quite easy to operate, but before you learn that, there is much other work to be done." Jason led Oron and I to an open elevator which took us to the 4th floor of the building. When we stepped out, we could see the laws were filled with pockets full of scrolls. We were both amazed. We never dreamed so many existed. "What is this?" Oron asked, still in awe. "This is where you'll be spending most of your time for the next few months. These are ancient files." He pulled one from the wall pocket. It was brown with discolor as compared to the more yellow hue of the newer scrolls. As he touched it, some of it flaked off into pieces. "As you can see, are in need of preservation. First, the parchment is carefully inspected. If all is legible, the document is repaired first so that all data is intact. All documents shall be created for preservation and then are stored in our archives in the bottom of the building. Starting today, you will begin inspecting documents. I will show you what to look for. We have set up treatment rooms on the next floor down in the preservation department. Oron, our expert in preservation, shall show you how the documents are treated. You must remember that this is very important work. You must be very careful." "Yes, sir. I shall be very careful." "Good. Now as for your servant. Esser. His name is Esser," Oron said defiantly. Being over a head taller than Oron or Jason, I took one of the scrolls very carefully from the uppermost pockets and gave it to Jason, trying to impress him. He looked at me and smiled. "I suppose I was going to be hasty with your Esser's abilities, but he has shown us he will be quite helpful. Plus, if he can understand, he would make a nice runner between us." "Oh, yes, Jason. Esser is very intelligent. You wait and see. You will be very pleased with both our work." "Enthusiasm appears to be something you both are not lacking in. Now let's begin." Jason opened the scroll and showed Oron what to look for. At the end of the day, Oron and I walked wearily to our new home. Since Oron had matured enough for apprenticeship, he no longer resided in the group home. He had his own quarters in the house of his parents. It was almost nightfall as we walked down the street. Oron walked on dreamily, dropping my leash carelessly, dragging it behind us. I also was lost in thought and could think of nothing but all the exciting work that we had done that day. I was so happy with the exciting new life that I absent-mindedly began to coo a song. Suddenly, as if from nowhere, 2 young men appeared next to us. Both men were bigger than Oron, but not as big as I was. I could feel Oron tense up as the men approached us. It didn't seem to bother me, not that I thought of it at the time, but I could have knocked them both out in a heartbeat. Basically, I just ignored them. "Look at the big bird, old Mel," one man said mockingly. He was a man in his 20s, wearing a very stylish robe with jewels on his belt and wrist, indicating he came from the sons of Belial. "Looks like he would make a fine feast." He smacked his lips together to accentuate his point. Oron was terrified. He walked faster and was stiff with fear. Before he knew it, the young man called Omel had grabbed my leash. Oron turned around quickly when he heard the dragging leash being picked up. "Wait! He is my servant!" Oron cried after him as the young man tugged at my leash. I stubbornly refused to move, much to the dismay of Omel, who yanked and yanked, expecting me to move. Frustrated and still yanking at my leash, he blasted, "Then you should have kept a better rein on him. He was disturbing the peace with his quacking." The other man retorted and grabbed at the leash as well, hoping to pull me away. Oron pushed Omel's friend, which released his grip on the leash. "You leave him alone!" Oron screamed. The young man didn't take kindly to being pushed. He came back quickly, knocking Oron into a bush. I had tried to contain my anger up until this point, but now I was mad. I rose, my wings lifting myself into the air. As I did, I pulled up my legs and then quickly released a powerful kick, sending both young men to the ground. I ran quickly to Oron, who was splayed across the bush. I gestured for him to jump on my back, and before the young men could realize what had happened, we had flown off. We had got far enough away, and I brought us down far away from the man into the park. "Thanks, Esser," Oron sighed as he brushed off his robe. "Here earlier I was worried about you." He laughed. "You can take care of yourself just fine, but I think we should keep this little secret. I don't think Bikel and Shiaba would be happy with our flighty departure." He looked around, making sure we were not seen. He picked up my leash. "I guess I should be more careful. And you too." We started to walk towards home. "I like it when you sing, but in public I guess it just brings too much attention to you." I nodded in agreement. It was a quickly lesson learned. Amused by the incident, my lips perked up on each side, giving me the closest thing I had to a smile. When Oron noticed it, he laughed. I too let out sort of a laugh, sounding more like squeaks than human laughter. Oron tried to muffle it with his hand. He gestured and sounded, "Shh," as we continued walking onward, sharing our secret joke. Finally, we reached Pikal and Chiaba's home. It was a one-story abode made of polished granite and marble. Beautiful gardens surrounded it with a stream that gurgled through the garden into the rear of the house. Beautiful rocks were scattered throughout the sculptures of nature. There were no such things as locks on the doors in ATLATIA, and many didn't even have doors. In fact, many of ATLATIA's warm weather there were only open-air windows. We quietly approached the intricately carved, ornate door. After a deep breath from both of us, Oron turned the knob and slowly opened it. We both were hoping we could keep from revealing our secret from our intuitive mother and querying father. As we walked into the foyer, we could see the dining room ready for our arrival. Pikal and Chiaba sat at a table laden with luscious fruits and vegetables. Pikal stood upon hearing our arrival. He had been anxiously awaiting the news of the day. He greeted us with exuberance. "Well, how was your day?" Oron smiled. I let out a giggle. "It was great. I knew I'd love it." Jason was pleased with Esser too, Oron reported, showing his enthusiasm. Pikal smiled, putting his arms around us, leading us into the table. "This will be our first real family dinner," said Chiaba joyfully. She picked up a goblet and toasted. "May there be many more." We all lifted our goblets. Even I lifted one with my beak, although it was empty, since there was no way I could drink from my tiny goblet. Chiaba noticed my dilemma and quickly got a bowl for me to drink from. After we all drank, I tapped my goblet with my beak, and my mind sent out these thoughts. "Thank you for all your love, your care, and your faith in me." Oron, who read my thoughts, was about to share it when Chiaba spoke. "We understand, because you are a part of us forever." This is probably the happiest night of both Oron's and my life. As we ate, I watched my loving family, who had so dutifully taken care of me over the years. What would have happened to me if Chiaba had not taken me in? What happened to my real family? Those sad thoughts had crossed my mind many times, but I wouldn't let them ruin this very special night. I listened as Oron babbled on to our parents about the events of the day. I knew that one day Oron would be a great scribe, and he would always be there to help me. I watched as Chiaba and Pikal listened with pride to their sons' tales of the day. I had wished that I could talk so they could hear my accounts as well. For the first time I realized that telepathy just wasn't the same as human speech. It was so much more powerful than thought. I prayed that someday I might be blessed with such a gift. Chiaba turned to me and said, "Just because you cannot vocalize your thoughts does not mean that we are any less proud of you, my dear Esser." She took her arm and put it around me as she gave me a kiss. "We love you both very much." Later that evening, Chiaba led us into the meditation and prayer to the One. It was a spiritually uplifting evening, which made the day complete. However, the incident with the young men, who are the sons of Belial, would remain our secret, and unfortunately, be only the beginning of our encounters.